In today's video, I am going to be breaking down some of the craziest, most complex basketball plays that I've seen last year while coaching over 5 teams. So let's get down, let's check these out. They're going to blow your mind. Some are pretty complex, others are just crazy, but they work. So let's get down, let's check them out really quickly. Make sure to go check out my complete guide to the 5-out basketball offense down below. Okay, so let's first set up a 2-3 zone defense, and this was actually ran against a tight 2-3. Now, a tight 2-3 defense is basically everyone stays inside the key unless there is a player with the ball in your zone and you are the only player who steps out of that zone. So, for example, if the player up top has the ball, there will be one player who goes up, the other one stays down, and it turns into a 1-1-3 style zone. This is because they want to try and cut off the high post, because the high post is one of the easiest ways to beat a 2-3 zone. So basically, that's that. So what we seen was this, and this was absolutely crazy and bonkers, but it was a 5-out offense, and they called switch, and what that means is player 2 goes to where player 3 is, player 3 goes to where player 2 was, and of course these guys switch as well. So while these guys are doing their switching stuff, what we see is as soon as that happens, player 1 passes to player 3, and that forces player 2 to move out and player 1 to cover that high post. We then heard them call switch once again. And what this does is it brings player 1 and 2 to switch and players 4 and 5 to switch as well. What they're basically doing here is they're just trying to confuse the defense. And this can technically work on a tight zone because now you've got players who are cutting across the key. Obviously, none of these guys want the ball in the key. So at this point, you get a couple of the more inexperienced players stretching outside of that zone. And as soon as you see that, or as soon as they seen that, they started cutting these point players towards the rim. And as soon as that happened, he was able to get himself an easy layup, or that collapsed more of the defense where they did a hammer pass out for a 3-point shot. So while that was a simple play, there's a lot of movement in that offense, and it can confuse some players if they're running against a tight style zone defense. Now, this is actually a zone offense that I run myself because, or at least with one of the teams that I coach, because it just works so well. I've seen it run, and usually in a zone offense, what you're usually seeing is a 1-3-1 style like this. You're basically passing that ball around. They're trying to get that ball into the high post, and there is absolutely zero movement on the offensive side. All these guys are doing is just passing the ball around to the open man. They're just trying to create gaps so that they can get a layup, but there's no movement. However, once I seen this one team running this play, and I thought to myself, well, I need to run this as well because there is just so much movement. I like it. I like movement on offense. That's why I like the 5-out offense. So when player 1 passes the ball to the wing, because this is a lot better of an entry pass into the high post against the zone, this stretches the defense out, this pushes the defense down, and as soon as player 1 makes that pass, he switches with player 3. If player 4 is not open, let's say player 2 red is front facing him, then player 2 passes to player 3. When this happens, we want player 1 and 2 to cut baseline, do a low cut. And now these 2 players are guarding the top player. These guys are cutting. And now, because of that extra movement, we can have that pass, let's say, over to player 2, which can then stretch this defense out and potentially get that pass into player 4. At this time, player 5 moves up because, of course, now if the ball's in the high post, that's essentially usually player 5's spot. Player 4 usually sinks back down, but as soon as player 4 gets that ball, player 5 cuts across the key. He passes to player 5, and 5 gets an easy layup or a dunk. Now, while this may be a simple offense to be able to run, there's a lot of off-ball movement after every single pass. And the idea there is, of course, to be able to potentially get players open, because now the defense is more worried about the key when those players are cutting baseline. And, of course, you'll potentially get some open threes. Also, there is one more thing, too. Let's say player 4 gets that ball, right? And player 5 goes across, but it's covered pretty well, whatever, right? Now, if player 4 passes out to player 2, unless player 2 takes that shot, if he doesn't take that shot and player 2 red is able to recover, then we will have player 4 cut to the rim, player 5 pops up, and because we had that kick out pass, now player 4 is the low post player, player 5 is the high post player. Again, off-ball movement, it's that whole thing. Now I'm going to show this against a 3-2 zone, but it works extremely well against most other zones as well. So what we're looking to do here is have these two players in the high post. We're going to have a corner and a corner. This is a horns offense. And now you don't run a horns offense against the zone, but what we're looking to do here is two different ideas depending on the type of zone. So for example, if they're in a 3-2 zone, they're going to be probably trying to jam that high post so that these guys cannot get that ball. And in this first version of this offense, we're going to have player 4 set a screen for player 1 and player 5 set a screen out here to player 3. So now coming off of this staggered screen, we're going to have player 5 pop for a 3 and player 4 roll towards the basket. This essentially puts player 5 in a position to guard two players. And I'm going to tell you right now that if he guards player 3, player 1 passes to 4 for a layup. If he covers the paint, player 1 is going to pass to player 3, and player 3 better be cutting already. That's going to draw player 5. Player 3 has options to pass to player 4 or a hammer pass out to 2. If instead you're going up against a 2-3 zone, it's going to be very similar, but slightly different as well. So now we're still going to have player 5 setting that screen, but now we're going to be having player 4 set a pin down for player 3. Player 1 is going to use that screen. Player 3 is going to use that screen. If player 3 red tries to fight over top to guard player 3, this is going to result in player 4 being able to post up player 5, and 5 blue is going to roll towards the basket. And this usually, from what I've seen in game, resulted usually in player 5 rolling, clearing out, player 2 moving up. And usually what they would do is, because player 3 would try to go over top of this screen, player 3 red, or blue, would cut across, get that ball, and now he's putting player 5 and 4 into a position where now when he's attacking the rim, he can kick that ball out to player 2. This is going to push player 4 up, and of course the extra pass to player 5, who can take it to the rim or take a 3. A little bit more complex on that last play, but anyways, make sure to go check out my complete guide to the 5-out offense down in the description below, and I'll see you guys again next time.